good morning everyone, and thank you for being here today. I am Brianna Wesley, the assistant principal here at Step Charter. In today's meeting, we're going to talk about reviewing the instructional activities that we developed in our last meeting for our third grade EV students. As you know, we focus on helping these students master multiplication and academic language. And our goal for today is to reflect on the successes, challenges, and the areas that we need to adjust. I look forward to hearing each of your insights on what worked well and what improvements we can explore. Before we dive into the review, let's do a round of introductions. Please share your name, your role, and something notable, whether it's a success or a challenge, or something you feel like that we need to improve on, because you guys have seen these students since we've implemented these strategies, you have seen things that maybe worked, didn't work, or maybe things that we just need to take further. So let's start off. You've noticed different strategies that we implemented. So Jana, could you start off and tell us, introduce yourself, and then give us maybe some insights on the strategies that we've implemented with our third grade EV students.
Sure. I'm Jana Schaefer. I'm the principal here at Step Charter, and over the past few weeks, I've really been encouraged by all the engagement I've been seeing in the third grade classrooms. Our EV students seem so much more comfortable in participating in the math discussions, especially when we're using and referring to the bilingual word wall and using the manipulatives at their desk. One thing that surprised me was seeing the students casually using the math academic vocabulary. I heard words like factor and multiply during their social interactions, and it's just clear that they're really starting to integrate that language and better understand it from the explicit teaching of that language.
All right, awesome. That's fantastic to hear, Jana. It sounds like those strategies that are really empowering to our students. Do you think that there is room for improvement in the vocabulary, or is it just helping with do you feel like it's helping their math fluency, or do you feel like we need to improve on how we're teaching the academic vocabulary?
I absolutely think that it's something we should continue focusing on. It's not just that they know the words, it's that they're applying them correctly when they're working on their math problems and having turn and talks and explaining their thought process to their answers to their teacher. It's a big shift from where we were at the beginning of the year, and it's just only going to continue to build their confidence. And it's so important that we build their confidence. When they feel confident about themselves, they have a positive attitude towards learning, not just math, but all their subjects. It helps reduce any anxiety or fear that they may have of failure, like messing up or not getting it, or sounding like they don't know what's going on. And it just allows for them to develop better skills as they face more challenges for the rest of their academic career. Research shows that self-confidence is linked to an increased performance overall. So when students believe in themselves, they often achieve better. So by continuing to foster the confidence in our students, it creates a supportive learning environment where they can thrive to their full potential, not just in math, but in all of their classes.
And since you mentioned increased confidence, have you noticed any changes in the students' willingness to work with their peers and take on those leadership roles in class? So we talked about peer tutoring being one of the strategies. So do you feel like our EV students are willing to be able to lead other students, or do you feel like we still have work to do in building, continuing to increase their confidence?
I have seen an increase in their willingness to work with their peers and take on leadership roles. I think it is an area that we could continue to focus on with Fidelity. Students who usually were more hesitant to maybe interact or share, they're now volunteering to lead a small group discussion when they're at the teacher table with a small group of students. They're more willing to volunteer to explain, to work out the problem on the board, and they seem more connected to their classmates overall, which just improves the classroom dynamic. Like I said before, confident students typically will ask more questions, they'll seek help, they will advocate for themselves, and I'm seeing that all of those things in the classrooms. overall will lead to a more effective learning journey for the students, as we know that it doesn't just end here with this, what we've been implementing now. We want this to continue. And this willingness will foster growth and deeper learning, again, not just in math, but in all of their classes.
And I agree with that, because I always think about when we're in staff meetings. If we don't know the answer to something, we don't feel comfortable. We're not always going to be the first one to shout out or answer a question. So same thing with students, and I feel like with building confidence, it's something that's continuous. Like you said, it doesn't just stop. You just keep building it on. So it's good. All right, Ms. Riccio, would you like to introduce yourself next and kind of give us some successes or areas you feel like we can improve on based off of what you've seen over these last couple of weeks?
Okay, sure. Thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Ms. Riccio, the instructional coach. I've been supporting the 3rd grade team, and I've been really impressed by how the students are tackling word problems. Before, many of them would avoid those questions, but now I think they're more willing to give it a try. Even if they make mistakes and they don't get it right the first time, they're still more willing to try. I think the bilingual word walls and the vocabulary pre-teaching really has, made a big difference. And I think, based on some of the data we've been looking at and some of the results from different checkpoints we've been doing, I really see that tackling word problems and digesting word problems is really important for student success in math. I do think they have the reading comprehension, based on their reading scores. But I think with math, it's, taking it a step further and just kind of really understanding what's happening in the word, what are the actions taking place in the word problem. So, I think that, like I said earlier, the academic vocabulary pre-teaching really is making a difference in that to help them understand the word problems.
Yeah, and that's a huge shift, especially for students who struggle in both, math and the language, because we always say, when it comes to word problems, it's a little bit different than just doing, a regular math problem that's not a word problem. And so when you don't understand that academic language, same thing kind of in reading on the other side of that is, if you don't understand one word, then maybe the whole sentence doesn't make sense to you. You can't comprehend what's going on. So same thing in those math problems, those word problems, where they're having to be able to know what each of those words mean to be able to work out the problem correctly. Ms. Riccio, have you seen or noticed any trends among students who are newer to English? And do you feel like, are they engaging with the material as confidently as others?
Well, that's a great question, Brianna. Some of our newcomers are a bit, hesitant still, especially during full class discussions. Kind of like you mentioned when we're, example with the staff meeting, obviously if you're new to that environment, you're not going to feel as comfortable speaking out. So I think we see that, but however, when they are in small groups, they are doing really well, and they seem to feel safer practicing their language and the math skills in that small group setting.
That makes sense. Maybe we can explore some ways as a team to expand small group opportunities or provide that structured language practice in a slow pressure environment. And we do small groups. We have the students pulled out, and we definitely do a good job here, I feel like, of making every minute count in instructional time for all, not just our ED students, but for all of our students. And so really it's just finding ways that we could expand those opportunities and using those strategies in small group, and also when they're, in the classroom, not in small group. Even though all of our teaching is done, in small groups, but finding ways, even if it's on technology, for them to still be able to use those strategies throughout their time, in math class. All right, let's see. So, Cheyenne, if you will, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then give us some successes or areas of improvement that you've seen being their teacher over these last couple of weeks.
Okay, so hi, I'm Cheyenne, and I teach 3rd grade. I've been working with small groups to target both math and language skills. One thing I've noticed is that students are much more open to asking questions when they're in smaller groups. They seem to enjoy the structure of breaking down word problems step by step, which has reduced frustration a lot.
Alright, that's some great progress. Are there any specific techniques, kind of with the small group instruction, that have been particularly effective? Do you feel like, certain ways that we're doing small group, do you feel like those are effective, or do you feel like there are things that we need to improve in that area?
Yes, I found that using sentence stems really helps a lot. So when we discuss word problems, I provide sentence starters like the product is or the factors are, and that seems to really boost their confidence in using academic language. By providing a starting point, sentence stems help scaffold learning, allowing students to build on their responses as they gain more confidence and understanding. The sentence stems also help promote the sharing of diverse viewpoints because they all start the same, however, their schema is all different, so they'll answer in different ways. And so enriching class discussions even with our EB students. Overall, the sentence stems enhance communication, support cognitive development, and create a more inclusive learning environment.
And that's a smart strategy. Have you encountered any challenges with students that are still struggling, even in the small groups?
Yeah, a few students still need more one-on-one attention. It can be tough balancing that with the needs of the whole group.
Yeah, I agree. And I know we talked about peer tutoring as one of our strategies, but maybe we can just add it even further as an additional layer of support, because we know students learn off of each other. So pairing that more confident student with those that need a little extra help, that might take some pressure off while we're continuing to reinforce those concepts. When students explain concepts to their peers, they reinforce their own understanding, and it also deepens their grasp of the material. So peer tutors often use language and examples that are more relatable to their classmates. So if we're putting, two EB students together and one feels more confident, they're able to, kind of meet the needs of, because they understand each other. They're speaking the same language, but one of them maybe has more increased confidence than the other. And so whenever they're giving those examples and making it more relatable to their classmates, it makes those difficult concepts easier for them to understand. So also making students, it helps them, the ones that are learning at different paces, and so that peer tutoring allows for differentiated instruction that meets the needs of individuals' needs more effectively. It also, I feel like the informal nature of peer tutoring, it creates like that supportive and low pressure environment. And so it reduces their anxiety because it encourages them, to be able to, it's encouraging like risk taking and learning. And so overall, I feel that peer tutoring, it harnesses the strengths of social interaction and collaboration, because not only is it helping their social skills, but also they're learning from each other, and they're getting able to collaborate and put all of their ideas together. And so I feel like that is very powerful, and it's a great tool for enhancing learning outcomes. Not only again for our EB students, even though that's what we're focusing on, but for our students all together, being able to learn off of each other and collaborate.
And I think the fear a lot of times with teachers when they are hesitant to use peer tutoring is because they feel like it's not fair to the higher student.
Yeah.
But like what you explained is all that's doing is giving that student another opportunity to demonstrate learning. I know when I was teaching middle school and high school, and I would have like 8 or 9 periods of the same lesson, by the time I was teaching that 9th time, it was like I could have done it in my sleep.
Yeah.
So to think that that lesson was so much better than that first period lesson. And so to think that for kids, when they're getting to explain it to one of their peers, even if it's a couple times that they're having to maybe explain it in a couple different ways to their peer, all that's doing is helping their better understanding too. So
I agree. All right, last but not least, Mirtha, can you introduce yourself and then again give us successes and or some improvements that you feel like maybe we can make within the strategies that we came up with and that we've implemented over the past couple weeks, but things that you've seen in your classroom again as their teacher.
here at STEP. The hands-on activities we introduced have been a game changer. My students, especially the EV learners, are much more engaged when they use manipulatives to solve problems. However, I have noticed that some students struggle to transition from using the manipulatives to working independently.
Yeah, and that's definitely, I feel like, a big thing because although we do give them manipulatives, we eventually want them to be able to do it on their own. Multiplication is one of those things I feel like once you learn it, you memorize it for the rest of life. I know I did, but that's not always the case, for everyone. And so I feel like those manipulatives help, but I think that's a really helpful insight to know that transition, it's kind of a hard transition from them going to manipulatives to working independently. But what do you think could make the transition smoother for them?
Well, I think it would help if we slowly reduce the use of manipulatives while encouraging students to explain their thinking out loud. So maybe we could also introduce reflection journals where they write down how they solve their problem. First with manipulatives and then without manipulatives.
Yeah, I think that's a good, a good tool, excellent idea. Because although, we want them to use manipulatives, we also don't want them to be dependent on it forever. So I think it's great that we have them use manipulatives, but also finding other ways that they can use manipulatives, but also be able to transition to not using manipulatives. And so I think journaling gives them that time to process their learning and kind of track their own progress. And so that's great too, because we talk about academic language. So that's giving them, use of that too. We can say, if they're journaling, try to use some of that academic language that we're teaching them, in these units. And so they're being able to relate it to the word problems and also being able to track, what they're learning and what they're thinking. Because sometimes I know a lot of kids, especially in math, same thing whenever we ask them to show work, and a lot of kids will say, well, I did it in my head. And I'm like, that's great, but Miss Wesley can't see, what you're doing in your head. And I know even as adults, we can do things in our head, but it's always good, I feel like, to journal and write things out. Even though maybe you're not a person that forgets things, but I think it's just a good tool for everybody to use. So.
Yeah, I really like your idea, Martha, about having kids write down something when they're doing math. So that could be maybe something that teachers incorporate as an exit ticket. So like at the end of the lesson, they could do, okay, you have to explain how you solved this question, right? And also something that maybe we could use to help kids transition from manipulatives or using, learning things concretely is before we move to the abstract, which is just teaching like the standard algorithm, we use pictures. So like you go from the manipulatives to representing that using pictures. So like drawing a model, it could be like an array model or whatever type of diagram, and spend some time there. And then once you feel like kids are, comfortable mapping or drawing a representation of the problem, then you can move to, the abstract and the standard algorithm for the scale.
Yeah, I think that's great because we talk about doing, kind of cross-curricular, and I feel like that's helping their writing skills as well, especially when we get into STAR and they get to the RLA test and they have to do those constructive response. And when you think about third graders, that being their first year taking a test, that can be, a really big transition. So same thing in, math. We talk about academic language being taught in RLA or maybe in science, but if we're also doing that in math, and then having the students in math journal to help in RLA, we're kind of helping in all subject areas. And so I feel like that's huge because, that's how they learn. And so it doesn't have to just be, like we said, vocabulary is not something that's just taught in RLA or it's just taught in science. There's things in math that they have to know too, because we know that math builds upon each other. All those concepts kind of build on each other every year. So it's like they don't get those concepts in third grade, then they get to fourth grade, and then it gets hard for them. And then if they don't get in fourth grade, it gets hard in fifth grade. So, if we're really setting that foundation right at the bottom in third grade where they're taking, that STAR test, then I think it'll really help them for for the years to come. Alright, so thank you all for those reflections, those introductions. They were very insightful. I want to go ahead and revisit our campus data from our TAPER report just as a reminder. So we know that STEP Charter itself, we serve kids that are in grades kindergarten through 8th grade. And here at the Wilcrest campus that we're talking about, we have about 305 students. And we know in 3rd grade, we have 2 classes, each have 20 students. And so we know that 54% of them are classified as our EB learners. So that's over half of that 3rd grade population. And so at the start, we initially said that only 32% of our students, our EB students, were either meeting or exceeding those grade level expectations in multiplication. And me and Ms. Riso, kind of broke down and looked at the STAR questions from last year and kind of just like all the units. And when you notice, they see multiplication a lot. They see it, just regular multiplication. They see it in 1-step problems. They see it in 2-step problems, multi-step problems. So it's something that we really wanted to, again, that's why we came up with this being our instructional focus, because we felt like it was something that students need to have that knowledge to be able to successfully move forward and learn the other concepts. And so we know that our instructional focus has been integrating that math content with academic language to be able to close that gap, and then doing those multiplication word problems. And so today's goal, we talked about how well our strategies are working, and if we are making, if we need to make those necessary adjustments. And so, again, let's review the strategies that we implemented. So we said that we were going to use visual aids and manipulatives, and again, you guys gave some insightful insights about, us using those visual aids and those manipulatives. And Miracle, you even said that you felt like kids had that hard time kind of transitioning from manipulatives to independent work. And so you talked about journaling was a good idea, and the kids being able to write down their thinking. Bilingual resources, we've seen that in not only just in visual aids in the classroom, different books, but also in our technology programs. Small group instruction, we do that because, again, all of our teaching is done in small group. We have our teacher table where the small groups are done. We have our tech table where the kids are working on, those technology programs, and then they're also getting pulled out for additional small group instruction. And then our technology integration, again, they have those different apps, bilingual resources, and also just our typical math apps that everybody is using as a school. And Ms. Ricio talked about last time, when we use iReady, we kind of make it a competition for all the grade levels, and we've seen a huge increase in math lessons, because I think the kids, again, that increased confidence, they're more confident in being able to answer and pass those lessons. And so it's really funny because I feel like reading lessons, they were passing my reading lessons each week, but now we're seeing that over the past couple weeks they've been passing more math lessons, and so I feel like that's working. And then those hands-on activities and the peer tutoring, we've seen some good things with that. So Cheyenne, how has small group instruction worked for you in your classroom?
It's been super effective. Students are way more engaged, and I've seen a real major improvement on how they approach word problems. Smaller groups encourage active participation and discussion, allowing students to engage more deeply with the material and with one another. Also, in small group instruction, students can learn from each other, benefiting from different perspectives and explanations, which can deepen understanding, and students feel more comfortable expressing their thoughts and asking questions in smaller settings, boosting their confidence.
So, are you feel like there are any specific areas where students are still struggling?
Some students need more focused attention, and managing that with the whole group can be super challenging.
And even though we do like the small group, where we have like the 10 students at teacher table, and then we have the 10 students in technology, if they're not being pulled out in small group in technology, 10 students does not seem like a lot, but when students need, that focused attention, you know, it can be challenging, because, you know, maybe these 4 kids over here get it, but then you have 3 kids that are struggling, and maybe they're not struggling on the same part. So, we have to be able to meet the needs of all students. And so what are some ways maybe y'all feel like would help us have that more focused attention for those students that might be struggling?
I know something that was recommended before was to kind of, because I know usually we do like we group kids by where they are academically, and I was told that we should mix that up. So like instead of having 10 kids who are lower, maybe I do 5 kids who are really high, and then 5 kids who are pretty low, and then mix them up in how they even sit.
Right.
Just to kind of go back to that whole peer tutoring thing. And so they're able to help each other, and you know, kids just learn different when they hear their friends say it versus how I say it, even though I promise we're saying the same thing, but you know, it clicks different. And so instead of trying to target how all kids are, you know, they may be low in different spaces, I think it would be better to have the mix of high and lows in one group.
I agree, because I think my first couple years of teaching, you have to learn that when you first step into the classroom, things that you know, sound good until you try them out, you're like, oh, that's not working. And so I think it was a situation my first year where I had a game of Jeopardy as a review game, and I kind of split the group up, and you know, talking about them sitting like maybe every other, maybe I had these kids over here that were low and these kids that were high, and then it's like you split them, and it's like all these kids are getting the questions right, and these kids are struggling, and then it's like it's not fair. But when you have, you know, that mixed grouping, not only is it helping them out, but like you said, they're getting that peer tutoring, they're being able to learn off of each other. Because if you're putting 2 students next to each other, and both of them don't have that increased confidence, that can be, both of them could be frustrating, you know, and then it's like they're not learning anything. And so it's hard for, you know, to have, like you said, one group of low, one group of high, because that's not always the best situation. And I also think in math, I think it's a little bit different too than reading, because you have some kids that you get to a unit and they know it, and then they get to the next unit and they're lost. And so, you know, it's hard to be able to say, well, this kid is high everywhere, this kid is low everywhere, because they're gonna have mixed abilities when it comes to learning different things. Like maybe multiplication is really easy, but then they get to division and they're like, oh, I don't know that. You know, so I think it's good to mix them up, you know.
Thinking about ED students are also in the process of developing language, not just academic language, but just English in general. The more opportunities they get to talk to each other, to write, like going back to those journals, when they're getting an opportunity as many times as they can to practice writing in English, practice speaking in English. Those are built-in opportunities for them to continue developing their English proficiency, which for that population of students is another academic journey that they're having to make on top of learning all the content like the other kids. And so it's really important to create those opportunities for turn and talks or quick writes, so that the kids can continue developing the language, so that hopefully as they continue to learn more English, they learning math and reading and science and social studies, all of that becomes easier as they're obtaining more English.
And I also think with that, the challenge you mentioned, Cheyenne, about certain students needing more, even, you know, I know we're teaching in small group, but then some students you feel like need more individualized attention. I think that the model we have here at STEP, where our TAs do pull out throughout the day, I think you could use that to your advantage, right? And create schedules with the TA to target those kids that you feel like need even more individualized support too throughout the day.
And would it be, you think, beneficial, Ms. Riccio, to maybe even group the kids based off a recent test, like objective, like these 3 kids all missed the questions on, you know, multi-step multiplication, and maybe those 3 kids are sitting near each other so that you can work with those 3 kids on that at your small group. So it's essentially smaller groups within the small group.
Right.
I don't know if that would be helpful or.
Yeah, I think that, that's one of the things you wanna do when you look at data is see, trends or patterns and see which kids, have the same deficit, right? Or, whatever the case is, and mix your grouping, so that's why grouping should be flexible. Kind of like how you guys have mentioned, right? You don't keep the same seating arrangements for the whole year because like Ms. Wesley mentioned, these kids might understand, have a better grasp of this concept, but then that can change every unit, right? So like every so often, or depending on your instruction, those groupings should be very flexible and fluid and constantly changing. And so I think you're right, Michelle, for that, based on certain benchmarks or checkpoints that we have throughout the year, I think that's a good strategy for teachers to use, is to build their groupings based on that information and say, okay, and then that can help both the teacher in the classroom with her tier 1 instruction, but also maybe for pullouts. These kids can get pulled at the same time because I know they have these certain deficits. So I think that's a good idea.
Alright, so Jenna, I know we talked about iReady was one of the school-wide trends that we see, because we see them passing, more math lessons than the reading lessons for these past couple weeks. And I think that's great because we typically in the morning we were doing dear time, drop everything and read while the kids are coming in, eating breakfast, and just getting ready for the day. And we actually changed that over the last couple weeks when we started doing iReady math in the morning, because that's our struggle, math, in certain grade levels as a whole for our district. And so we really wanted to see how we could target more math instruction. And so that's where it's coming to where we've been seeing them pass, being more confident in passing, those math lessons over the reading lessons. But do you feel like, when it comes to school trends, do you feel like, what school trends have you seen that are related to the student engagement on these and strategies that we have implemented over these last couple weeks, besides maybe, doing iReady in the morning instead of dear time?
Yeah, so one thing I've noticed with the iReady math in the morning that I really like is, because of how iReady works, they're each working on a different pathway, depending on their beginning of the year diagnostic. And so that's just, it takes away so much time and effort from the teacher having to be like, you need to work on this, you need to work on this, to every kid in the classroom. Since it's already built in that way, they're able to come in and start working independently on their iReady math, and it's tailored towards their individual needs. And really that, I think, is gonna make a huge difference by the next time we're doing our benchmarking. And it's, as much as I think reading is important as well, we weren't really sure, we didn't have as much in control of what the kids are choosing to read for dear time.
Right.
They're able to get onto Epic and pick something that maybe wasn't on their level, which as a former reading teacher, I'm not totally opposed to. I think it's okay for kids to have choice in their reading, because a lot of times kids will naturally choose to read something maybe a little bit harder because the book looks cool, which should happen. Also, sometimes they'll choose to read a book that's a little easier, and that's okay too, because it's building their confidence. Like, wow, look how quickly I just finished reading this book. But the difference with the iReady math in the morning is what they are working on is something that has been tailored towards their individual need. So overall, I do think it's a very effective use of that morning time. Additionally, I've noticed that the students are more comfortable collaborating with their peers. This has improved both their academic performance and their social skills. The overall academic has improved because I recently have been reviewing report cards and being here over the years, seeing kids who maybe last couple years didn't have such great grades. I have informally noticed some differences. Some kids that have maybe closed some gaps that started in like first or second, and now because of all the strategies and how we've been doing things with them in third grade, they're doing better than I think I would have anticipated. And so that was really great to see. And then speaking of the social skills, it's just so important for kids to, like I said, communicate with each other, communicate with their teachers, overall just developing their social skills, because it's just an effective way to express themselves, to listen to others, to be a good friend, to be a good student, in an engaging way to interact in meaningful conversations, which are essential for kids not only in their academic success but in their personal success. And one of the things about STEP is we care about developing the whole child.
Yeah.
We're not only wanting to prepare them with all of the academic knowledge that they need to be successful, but we want them to have all the social and emotional support and development that they need to, eventually leave us and become successful citizens in our society and contribute. And well, there's lots of different ways that we do that through our counseling, through the way that we approach discipline by having sort of a more positive response to discipline and having conversations with kids to help them learn. Because something I've always said is, and I'll just keep repeating until the day I die, is it's not only important for us as educators to teach math, reading, science, social studies, but we have to teach behavior too.
Yeah.
We can't expect kids to walk into the door and know how to behave. And just like we have to model it, we have to show examples and non-examples, and I think younger elementary teachers do better at that, right? They teach how to walk in the line.
Yeah.
They teach how to appropriately walk in the hallway. They'll do a silly, goofy walk in the hallway and be like, is this how I should walk down the hallway? And the kids are like, no. And then you walk how you're supposed to. And those seem like common sense things that just kids should know, but unfortunately,
They don't.
They don't. And some kids come in with more, hey, Mr. William?
I remember Brooke told me I should check it in.
Yeah, we're just having a quick meeting for Miss Wesley's principal program.
I'll let y'all leave it to you.
Okay.
I'll just check it.
Okay, see ya.
Perfect person, because that's a point I was about to bring up. Mr. William, our superintendent, I think it starts from the top. So Mr.
Yeah.
William does a good job in modeling to us as staff people.
Right.
And I think that translates to the teachers, and that translates to the students. And so you're right. So like, you would never see Mr. William in a staff meeting on his phone unless it was something urgent about our schools. And so same thing as teachers. And then that translates to our students. So if, it's coming from the top and it's being modeled, and then it's just like a chain. Yeah, it's a chain. So I feel like we do a great job of that. We all have really good models of that. And so that's why I feel like you said, we're not only teaching academics, but we're having to teach behaviors. And I think when it comes to the older grades, you're right. They don't teach walking in the line because it sounds silly, but sometimes kids don't know that. I know this year we have students that are homeschooled, and being able to follow a schedule, and having more structure. It seems like you would think they would know that, but like when you're not used to doing that, it's not going to come natural to you. So same thing when it comes to our academics in the classroom. We have the students in the habit of, they know they're doing small groups every day. They know they're going to practice I-rating in the morning. So having that routine and continuously following it, for the whole school year, I feel like it makes a huge success and a big difference of our instruction as a whole.
And kids love routines. They love to know what to expect.
Yeah.
They love to come in, and if you're off by 1 minute, they love to write.
It's recess time.
Miss Cheyenne, it's time for.
Yeah.
So that to me shows that, like, yes, there's a clear routine and expectation. I like to think a really strong classroom could function without the teacher being in it. Yeah, that the kids are so well trained on the expectations and what they do that they could do it themselves.
Yeah.
Even in teaching them though to be very used to routines, we also do teach them to be adaptable as well, because the transition from epic or just gear time in the morning to now doing iReady in the morning was really smooth for third grade. They did it quick. There was no complaints. They just did it, and now in the morning they come in, they get their laptops, they open it, they're straight on iReady. I haven't had to correct anyone or anything, which I expected a little pushback, but there was none. So I think we do a great job of that here, and it is something that we do have to teach. So.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to us they have that increased confidence. They're like, oh, 30 more minutes of iReady math,
Yeah.
I got it, you know? And so when they're able to see visually, having an iReady boards, I think is just huge because they're able to see, oh my God, we passed this many lessons this week. And it being a team thing. So it's not just like, no one knows if this kid passed 5 lessons and this kid passed their 2 that they have to pass in a week. And so it's really just all coming together and getting that total number and having those rewards. I feel like they light up when they see like, oh, wow, like we have that many lessons passed. So I just think that's great, you know. All right, so now let's talk about some of the challenges before we wrap up. So Mirtha, we talked about, you shared that one of your insights was you feel like manipulatives are great, but the kids have a hard time transitioning from using manipulatives to being able to work independently. And so how do you feel like we can address this issue of the kids relying too much on manipulatives? I know you talked about journaling, but how do you feel like maybe we can gradually wean them off of being too reliant on manipulatives?
So gradually reducing manipulatives and adding verbal or written explanations should help them build independence. When students tackle tasks independently, they enhance their critical thinking and problem-solving skills, preparing them for future challenges.
Yeah, and so I really feel like them being able to journal is going to make a huge difference because you know, maybe it'll help them. Yes, they get to use manipulatives, but they also let me write down what I just learned. That way I don't forget it. So I think that's going to make a huge difference and also continue to build their confidence. Because maybe it might even be a situation where yes, they're journaling what they think and they might say, okay, I understood this today, but this part I was kind of struggling. And maybe it's something that the teachers could even pick up daily and kind of read. And so you kind of know, like the kids are like, okay, they got this, but you know, they're being able to vocalize and say, I'm still kind of struggling on this a little bit. So I think that's going to make a huge difference. And I think it's an excellent idea. That's definitely an adjustment that we will make moving forward. As we talk about continuing to implement these strategies and also, you know, continuously meeting and being able to improve, come up with ways that we can improve because that's what we're here to do as educators. Maybe one thing that's working works for a little bit and then you feel like, oh, well, let's try it this way. And that's okay because that's what education is all about. And so I feel like that's, you know, that's huge.
I think that doing the journaling will give teachers also, it's like a quick formative assessment because if kids can explain their thinking, then you know they grasped it, right? If we can understand, if we can explain something to somebody, that means we understand it ourselves.
Right. Yep.
So I think that would be a quick check-in for the teacher, like this kid gets it, and this kid I need to work with more.
Right.
And then something you could do scaffold kids into writing is providing sentence stems like we mentioned earlier, giving them a word bank with vocabulary words so that they feel more comfortable and confident into writing, putting their thoughts into writing.
I agree. And like you said, we can even, it's a good exit ticket. It's a good, you know, formative assessment and kind of just seeing because it also comes into peer tutoring. So, you know, those kids that feel confident and can write down, this is what I know, are able to teach their peers. And so I feel like that's another way. Maybe that even helps your mixed grouping. Okay, this student said on here they're struggling with this, but this student knows how to do it very well. So maybe you pair them together. So I feel like it's helping a bunch of different things, you know, as a whole.
Sorry, lastly, the last domain of acquiring language that is developed is speaking. That's always the last part.
Yeah.
And so they typically can write before they can speak more fluently. So it's again building that fluency in just the English language, and a lot of kids will feel more comfortable writing than trying to speak or explain it. And so I think that will be helpful too in that regard.
All right, so based on our discussion today, these are the adjustments that I proposed and that we've kind of agreed on as a team. We're gonna have the gradual release of manipulatives. Mirtha brought up to do that, we'll be able to, the kids will have the journals and be able to write down their thinking. Ms. Risa said that's, a way to have a formative assessment, and it can help, all those different areas, whether it's helping you, just formatively assess what they're learning, or helping you build those mixed groupings. And so we'll be able to see, if that, is working and how they can gradually not be so reliant on those to use the manipulatives. We also talked about the increased use of interactive bilingual resources, so we're going to continue, with our technology programs for the bilingual resources, and also, our visual aids, but just continuing to do that. So giving them more time at using those. And then additional opportunities for peer tutoring. We talked about, maybe as a whole, maybe sitting down the teachers and the TAs, and having your groups, maybe, I think Ms. Schaefer said, Ms. Risa said, oh, I need to pull these 4 kids, based off of these TEKs, from a recent checkpoint, or, maybe you're using it, of your mixed grouping in the classroom. Like you said, you like to mix them up. Maybe you're putting a high kid and then maybe medium and low,
Right.
however you want to use it. And so those are the 3, adjustments that I propose, as a team that I feel like really will make a difference. And so does everyone agree with that?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So thank you all for your time and insights today. I'm excited to see these adjustments, that will further support our students. And again, let's meet again in a few weeks, to evaluate our progress and figure out the areas that we need to improve, or maybe there's successes and we don't need to improve. And so I'm really excited over the next